Sometimes good news is so unbelievable at first that one can only laugh. And that's exactly what Sarah did. And then she denied it. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas, and this is your daily devotional for Friday, October 7th, 2022. At this stage of the story of Abraham and Sarah and their family, years have passed since Abraham answered God's call to leave his home and venture to wherever it was that God was leading him. There have been bumps along the way. Abraham has allowed Sarah to be taken as Pharaoh's wife in order to protect himself. Sarah has given her servant Hagar to Abraham to produce a child on the assumption that she was simply barren and unable to produce a child. And yet, God continues to reaffirm the promise. Genesis 17 tells the story of God's appearance to a 99-year-old Abraham, expanding upon the earlier promises, including offspring. Now, in yet another story containing a bit of disbelief, God appears to Abraham in the place that he has settled near the oaks of Mamre, only instead of some mystical appearance, no burning bushes here, God appears in the presence of three men, apparent travelers. Now, in the culture of that time and place, strangers who came to visit were to be shown radical hospitality. In fact, there are still places in the Middle East where this practice continues to this very day. So, when they show up, Abraham kills the proverbial fatted calf, figuratively and literally. First, he brings water for them to wash their dusty feet. Then he asks Sarah to bake some breads. He has one of his field hands slaughter a calf and prepare it, and he serves his guests curds and milk. Then, in the custom of the day, he serves them the meal and stands aside while they eat. Now comes the strange part. It's best first just to listen to it from the Bible itself. The men said to him, "Where is your wife Sarah?" And he said, "There in the tent." Then one said, "I will surely return to you in due season, and your wife Sarah shall have a son." And Sarah was listening at the tent entrance behind him. Now, Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in age. It had ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women. So Sarah laughed to herself, saying, "After I have grown old and my husband is old, shall I have pleasure?" The Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Shall I indeed bear a child now that I am old?' Is anything too wonderful for the Lord? At the set time I will return to you in due season, and Sarah shall have a son." But Sarah denied, saying, "I did not laugh," for she was afraid. He said, "Oh yes, you did laugh." It is a pretty surreal scene, you have to admit. One of the strangers announces that he will return for another visit and that Sarah will conceive and have a son. What does this mean, and what would Abraham have understood him to say? Was he hinting that he himself would make Sarah conceive, and in the natural way, would a stranger come and lie with Sarah? It's impossible to say what Abraham thought about this dramatic, almost absurd statement. But Sarah, listening from inside the tent, finds it rather amusing, or perhaps unbelievable and therefore laughable on the face of it. In any event, she does laugh. Now, the text says she laughed to herself. Was it a silent chuckle? A loud guffaw? No way to know. But what the text does say is that the stranger, whom the writer once again identifies as Yahweh, the Lord, asks Abraham why Sarah laughed. Apparently, this was no trifling matter. The Lord repeats the promise of a son in due time. And obviously feeling caught, Sarah denies that she laughed. But God, who is not to be trifled with, lets her know in no uncertain terms that she did indeed laugh, and he heard it. And with that, the story makes a major turn away from this scene between the three strangers, Abraham and Sarah. But what does it mean that Sarah laughed. From the context of the story, it's clear that it is interpreted as disbelief. But is it truly disbelief as in skepticism? Or is it disbelief in the sense of hearing news that seems too good to be true? Or maybe both at the same time? Turns out, Sarah is not so different from us. I'm often struck by how hard we make the faith. Can salvation really be a free gift of grace? Surely there's more to it than that. Surely something more is required of us than just to accept it by faith, we say to ourselves. And many of the disagreements in the history of the church have boiled down to this very thing. We simply find it hard to believe that salvation can be so easy. And what is that, if not a kind of disbelief? But the good news is that in spite of Sarah's apparent disbelief, God fulfilled the promise. Sarah did conceive and bear a son. And her laughter echoes through the ages in the child's name. For the name Isaac, or Yitzhak in Hebrew, is a form of the verb to laugh. Sometimes good news is so preposterously good that we can only laugh with joy when we hear it. Tomorrow, Abraham bargains with God. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.